Hey everybody, I wanted to do a really quick video about Terence McKenna and TimeWave Zero. I had an opportunity this summer to look into Terence McKenna and his philosophies and ideas really closely, and part of that was looking into TimeWave Zero. So I thought I would do a quick video to explain what TimeWave Zero is and why it doesn't work. TimeWave Zero is a computer program that Terence McKenna invented, and it was supposed to predict the future, basically. And it was also supposedly to end on December 21st, 2012, which made it really popular among the 2012 crowd, as you can imagine. So it's a numerological formula that purports to calculate the ebb and flow of novelty. Now, novelty was something that Terence himself called a very slippery concept when he was pressed by somebody that was asking about it, and we'll look at that in a little bit later. But one definition of it is an increase in the universe's interconnectedness or organized complexity over time. If you think newness, the word novel means sort of new as a concept of that. You'll get an idea of what he means by novel, and that will be easy to understand as we look at the graphs. But he came up with the idea in '71 when he had a psychedelic experience in the rainforest, where he was spoken to audibly by a voice that he referred to as the Logos or Logos, and it told him specifically to go look at the I Ching to map time. That's what he said. So what is the I Ching? The I Ching is if you look on the left, these 64 squares have little lines on them, and you can arrange these in lots and lots of different ways. If you can imagine there's 64, there's probably hundreds and thousands, if not more, of possible ways that you can arrange these. And this particular way to arrange them is called the King-Win sequence. So he chose the King-Win sequence for a reason that I'm not aware of. I'm not sure if the Logos told him specifically the King-Win sequence. I know that the mathematician that looked at this was particularly concerned that there wasn't any really good reason to choose the King-Win sequence out of any of the other possible sequences. But nevertheless, we'll just say that the King-Win sequence was chosen for some mystic or whatever reason. This is how he came up with TimeWave Zero. Now, if you take this first block in the King-Win sequence and you count the changes from these lines to the next line, for instance, how many lines change from this to this? It would be 6. How many change from this block to this block? It would be 2. So you'd have 0, 6, 2. Or actually, you would have 6 would be the first number, and then 2, and so on. So you have 64 numbers between 1 and 6. And that was then used to create this and this third line. This third line is TimeWave Zero. You'll notice it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way down to 64. It's just a simple line graph. We have 2, as we mentioned there, the number of changes per block were graphed here. And then what he did was he actually just shrank this and duplicated it. And in this one right here, you actually have 2 of the exact same thing, just shrunken. And down here, you have the same thing. These are shrunken versions of this, and he has 6 of those down here. And then what happened was he merged all these together to get a much more in-depth graph, which actually takes some mathematical calculations to make this coherent, because otherwise it would just be a jumbled bunch of line graphs. It wouldn't make any sense. So it took some math to make these three, the amalgamation of these three, to make any sense whatsoever. That was the math that was disputed by Watkins and then was later corrected, apparently, to make this a more reasonable mathematical construct. So that's essentially how he got TimeWave Zero. One quote from Watkins, who was a supporter of Terence McKenna, and the reason why he wanted to help him with the math of this was because he was very interested not only in math, but also in the I Ching. So this was right up his alley. But when he got to look at the source code, he was a little worried. He said the way that he constructed the graph meant that at some point in history it would drop to 0, supposedly indicating some kind of infinitely novel event beyond which nothing could be said or described. This is where December 21st, 2012 comes in. A lot of people might be under the impression that he had arrived at the date via some kind of calculation. He certainly gave that impression. I remember being somewhat disappointed to find out that he hadn't calculated it. He had merely slid the graph back and forth along the timeline of history, as he understood it, until he got the best possible fit. What he means by that is, I'll show you by this particular slide right here. This is a slide that McKenna used when he was on the program, the television program that interviewed him about TimeWave Zero. It's also the graph that he referred to a lot. It's my personal belief that this is the graph that he slid back and forth until he got a pretty good fit. I think these had to fit if nothing else did, and we'll look at the other fits are sort of in quotation marks, but these fits, I think, are what he actually lined it up with. I think by doing so, he just named off things that he would consider novel: Muhammad, the end of the Islamic Golden Age, the Crusades, the Black Death, the New World discovered, American Revolution, and World War II. Were all probably there before this was superimposed, and he just simply slid this back and forth. This is not my guessing. I mean, I might be guessing about this slide, but the fact that he really did slide this back and forth to find the best possible fit in history is not disputed. That's his own, what he says about it. Now, he chose the atomic bombing of Hiroshima as the basis for calculating this end date in November of 2012. That is, when he was sliding it back and forth, he chose Hiroshima as one particularly novel event, and which ended up making it setting the end date, because remember, there is only an end date. There is no beginning date. So wherever he slides this thing back and forth will change the end date. So if he slides it over here, it's going to change this, and that's what happened with December 21st, 2012. He actually changed this to December 21st from November because Jose Arguelles had just done the Mayan calendar thing, and he came up with the date of December 21st, 2012. So Terence, by his own admission, simply slid the graph over to match with Jose Arguelles' numbers. Not any particular reason to do it. Not any mathematical reason to do it. He just slid it over because he just assumed it should go there as well. Now, what that did to Hiroshima, as you might expect, is it put it off a month. So instead of it being the Hiroshima, which is the most novel event, Terence just simply called it the end of World War II, a general end of World War II, which kind of demonstrates what Terence means by novelty being, as defined by him, is a slippery concept, and it certainly is slippery in that really anything gets to be a match, as we will see in a minute. This is a good example to show you that anything on this left side of the graph is not a match. What I mean by that is, at the bottom of something, of a graph, is supposed to be the end of an old era and the beginning of a new era. And so anything on this left side of the graph would not be novel, because it would be building up steam on the new thing. Nothing would be changing. No old things would be ending. This is all status quo up until here. So you'll never see Terence put any lines over here, no matter what happens. And what's funny is that if something really novel does happen, let's say some war or some really big thing in history, he just won't mention it. If it's on this left side of the graph. It's more about what he doesn't put on the graph is pretty interesting, but we'll see more about this as we go on. Now, anything on the right side of the graph gets to be a match. Basically, the intensity has absolutely no difference. For instance, without any claims of superiority or anything, he claims the crucifixion or the death of Christ is less novel than the birth of Muhammad. So those would be, you would expect to see the death of Muhammad and the death of Christ being juxtaposed, but instead we have the birth of Muhammad. Basically, I just want you to see that anything on the right side can be a match, and anything on the left side cannot be a match. Now, McKenna said that he was always open to somebody debunking the TimeWave Zero graph, but we needed more data. We needed to see if it did, in fact, accurately describe the future, and if it did, then that was the test. Well, the interesting thing is that since McKenna died, we now have 10 years of data of the last decade, a decade that Time magazine calls the decade from hell. So we have a very eventful time period to see how TimeWave Zero did. So let's check it out and see how it scores. Now, I chose this graph because this was made by somebody that was very much a supporter of McKenna and a supporter of TimeWave Zero. They made this graph to demonstrate to unbelievers that TimeWave Zero did in fact work. what they did, that's why they have dots at the top and at the valleys, the peaks and the valleys of every one of these peaks and valleys. What they did was they tried to find what event was happening at these peaks, and then tried to look at an almanac or whatever and tried to find the most significant event that happened. So they put the dots there first, and then they found out what it was that must have happened there. So this is why this graph is interesting. Now, in this graph, we find that the first attacks in 93 of the Twin Towers was much more novel than the last attack of 9/11. I like to use the 9/11 example here because of these two spikes. You'll notice that they kind of are similar in that they have a spike here that starts the fall, but yet it kind of goes over here and has like a second place where it falls. And that sort of does the same thing here. It starts to fall, and then it has yet another second thing. The interesting thing about this one is that it falls much, much, much lower than this spike does. So what I'm trying to say is that this is a good example. This spike, whatever happened in event-wise, should be much more significant than whatever happened on this spike. So we have here the 9/11 attacks, which causes this spike to fall, sort of halfway down here. And at the bottom here, we have Enron files bankruptcy. Okay, so that was the novel event that they found at the end of this. Now this one should be much, much more significant. This fell much further, is much more novel, and it was a pretty big deal. Now here we have, at the peak of this, the catalyst that caused this most significant drop was the UN declaring 2008 the Year of Languages. And the one that corresponds to 9/11 over here, the event that caused this huge drop, was a high-speed train through the English Channel opens. So, and then it of course ends with that one most novel event that happened in the last 10 years. Every one of us remember where we were on that event. It was when European astronomers discover 32 exoplanets. And of course, in being facetious, this is not a novel event. These are not catalysts for a novel event. Now, what's interesting is you'll find that, as this person rightfully would never do, is put anything on the left side of these peaks, because that would be by definition not novel. So they would never put anything there. The only thing that you do find on the left side is this one right here, and that is the earthquake and tsunami killing 200,000 people. Now that is very novel. In fact, the only reason why this person put this on this graph, even though it was clearly in the one place you cannot have anything be novel, is because if it wasn't here, people would ask where it was, because they're thinking about the big events that happened over the last 10 years, and the tsunami that killed 200,000 people would definitely be one of them. So they'd be looking to see where it was. So this is a pretty good example. Also, most people were expecting everything to end this November, and that's already came and went and proved once again that TimeWave 0 doesn't work. What are the problems with it? The starting and ending point of 2012 were chosen, not calculated, and they're based on Terence McKenna's preference. It failed miserably to predict accurately the future, even with the best possible version of it. And the versions really don't change all that much anyway. It's arbitrary. As Watkins said, the mathematics was totally everything from choosing the king-when sequence out of nowhere to simply sliding it back and forth to fitting where you think it should. It is not mathematical. It's not this wonderful thing that's supposed to be this pinnacle of mathematics. It's really, as he said, it's arbitrary. There seems to be no right or wrong answer. If it's on the top or on the bottom or even close to the bottom or close to the top, it's a match, even though it would never indicate any different degrees or levels there. And it's more about what is not put on the graph than what is. It's cherry picking dates. McKenna would simply not tell you about an event and not put it on his graph if it fell on the left side of the event. Really, TimeWave 0 has everything to do about what is not on the graph. It is choosing the dates that fit with what he's saying and presenting them to you, and not presenting the dates that don't fit in with it, and then hoping that nobody would notice that it was completely wrong over the last 10 years that it was supposed to be correct. So with that, I'll thank you for your time, and hope this helps. Bye.